Jordan Peterson and an aspect of what he has often said in regards to hierarchy in humans. That's us. Hi. And specifically in regard to hierarchy and socialism or Marxism or anarchism. Now, Jordan makes some very interesting points. I myself am very radically left-wing, yet I find Jordan Peterson to be an intelligent and well-meaning and erudite gentleman who says various interesting things which are worth thinking about, which doesn't mean I agree with him in general, and it certainly doesn't mean I become more right-wing. However, specifically on the case of hierarchy in capitalism and hierarchy in humans and hierarchy in left-wing approaches, there is a central problem, a central question as to how can we have a left-wing organised society if hierarchy is something built into human beings, built into our evolution. And it's a very important question, and potentially it's the kind of thing which could mean that left-wing approaches to society will simply not work. If we take a key point of that being absolute equality amongst all members of that society, and there being no hierarchy at all, especially in the various anarchist versions of left-wing approaches of how to organise society. If the idea of anarchism is that it's the voluntary cooperation of equals, then they are equal, then there is no hierarchy. Anarchism often states no gods, no masters, no leaders, no bosses. Okay, so that's a fundamental problem. If hierarchy is built into human evolution and animal behaviour in general, and it would appear that there is a certain validity to that point. So if we presume, just for now, that it is the case, then okay, how are we going to mix those two aspects? Now, it's not a new issue. People have been discussing this for a long, long time. I want to mention a quote from Leon Trotsky. I'm not sure when he said, actually, in the 1920s and 1930s, presumably. And he was talking about a train driver or a train conductor, and saying that we do not require the train driver to ask us when they're going to apply the brakes in a dangerous situation to save us from hitting a rock in the tracks, for example. They have to make that decision quickly themselves. It's ridiculous for them to stop and ask 30 passengers in the train, should I apply the brakes 3 seconds from now? So Trotsky makes that example, and it's a very good example to indicate that democratic control has some limits according to that way of conducting socialism and anarchism. And there's also the example of, for example, in an anarchist society, a socialist society, would a band, a group performing at a gig, would they stop and ask the 50 people watching them, what songs do you want to hear, and write it all out for us? They could do that, but normally we presume that it would be better for the band to decide themselves what songs they're going to sing or perform. And so in that case, the band has a certain temporary authority in the situation, and it seems silly even to call that authority call that an example of hierarchy. But it's a practical example. Another one would be if you go to the dentist. You would presume that the dentist and hope the dentist has expertise that they can apply to help you sort out your teeth. It would be a bit odd if the dentist was there in the waiting room asking everybody waiting how they wanted him or her to operate on their teeth. Right? So there are situations of expertise in a non-hierarchical society. So it's not that there would be no situations in which people would decide things with greater power than other people in those situations. There would be in a socialist or anarchist society. But the point is that the wider situation would still be organised in a non-hierarchical way, at least in comparison to the way things are now. There could still be a fundamental difference. So, for example, the train driver or conductor has that power to apply the brakes and avoid this dangerous situation. But, for example, if they were going at 2 or 3 times the recommended speed, it would be quite right for the passengers to collectively disempower that driver of their temporary mandated power. And likewise, afterwards, there would be some kind of investigation, collectively organised investigation as to why did the driver behave in that dangerous way in that situation, and their power would be taken away from them, their responsibility, their mandated temporary power would be taken away from them. And that's the key point, that there has been, previous to that train journey that you're on, a decision made by the collective group that that train driver and all the train staff who have that responsibility, they have had a mandate from the community, from the collective group, to have that contingent power. And the community can take that contingent power away from them again. Now, this is a very key point as to how we can have hierarchy, how we can have differentials in power, but still have an anarchist and socialist society which is based upon the idea of equality between all the people involved in that, and the ability of all the people involved in that community to participate in how the society is run. And that's not what we have